Good afternoon and welcome to the Bellingham City Council Committee meetings. Today is Monday, July 25th, 2022. We are going to start this afternoon with the Committee of the Whole, and I just wanted to make note that we do have a quorum of council members present, but it looks like we are short council members Anderson and Hussman, both of them are excused. So beginning this afternoon, we have a few items before us. The first of which is Agenda Bill 23404. This is an update on the development process, community engagement, and structure of proposed Whatcom County Racial Equity Commission. In partnership with the Chuckanut Health Foundation, the City of Bellingham and Whatcom County are funding, participating in, and supporting a community-led process to create recommendations for a county-wide racial equity commission. Representatives of the Chuckanut Health Foundation will report on the status and timeline for their work. But before we move to our presenters, I'm going to first turn it over to Mayor Fleetwood.
Oh, very good. Thank you, Councilmember President Stone. Good afternoon, council members and public. I'm happy to be able to just offer just the briefest context for this and then hand it over to, I think, Heather Flaherty, who will further introduce and begin the presentation. We all remember the tumultuous summer of 2020 after the murder of George Floyd and the racial justice protests that ignited nationwide. Of course, we had many marches and protests and activism in our own community. In response to that, the city and the county established listening series that began 2 years ago, right about now, went into August. Prosecutor Ritchie had listening sessions as well. It was very much the intention of all of us, I think, involved, that rather than just being done with the listening series and not taking further action, that we needed to commit to a process to do the harder work that would follow. Executive Sadhu and I referred to it as establishing task force later that fall. That was the intention. A group of community members came forward, represented today by Heather Flaherty, Suling Zhao, our very own Christina Michelle Martins was involved in that trio doing that hard work and made a proposal that you'll be hearing about more. But in the course of the last, goodness, 2 years, more actively, I suppose, year and a half, we've been working. There's been a planning group. Councilmember Hamill's been a part of that. And others. We've been meeting on a regular basis, at least that's the involvement I've had. There's been far more to it than that, which we'll hear about. But it's done nothing but instill growing confidence in this effort. It's really been impressive. And so I look forward to handing it over to Heather Flaherty now, who can further introduce and provide there's Sue Ling, hi, and give the presentation. Thank you. Go ahead, Heather.
Thank you so much, Mayor Fleetwood, and thank you to Council for having us here today to provide this update. I just want to say that it is a sincere honor and privilege to get to work alongside Suling Zhao and formerly Christina Michelle Martins as a partner in this process. And I'm just so excited to have this briefing before you. Suling Zhao has prepared an incredible presentation. I wanted to share a little bit, though. I think it's important sometimes, and Mayor Fleetwood, I think you did a really good job of reminding us of why we started this journey in the first place. And from the Health Foundation's perspective, there's really kind of three big reasons. One is the data, and you've all received presentations on health outcomes and outcomes amongst all of the systems in our community. And there are disproportionalities by race in all of them, in our criminal legal system, in healthcare, in housing, who's experiencing homelessness, in food, in finance, and banking. In every single system, we see disparities. And that's really important. And the second thing is the events of May 2020 and the murder of George Floyd and the community outpouring and questions that were being asked by incredible community leaders like Christina Michelle Martins asking, why are these things happening? And no, we all know we cannot create solutions without the people who are impacted by the problems. And then that's the third piece, is that at many of the government tables that I have the privilege of sitting at, task forces, during that time period, I heard leaders say over and over again, we want to do better, we just don't know how. And in my heart, I knew that developing something like a racial equity commission could be a really incredible response to help answer those questions of how. And that led to this partnership where Mayor Fleetwood and Executive Sadoo and Whatcom County and the city of Bellingham and all of you said, okay, let's intentionally enable a community-led, community-driven process and build this in a different way so that as a system, we do not perpetuate the outcomes that we are seeing and want to change and have be different. So with that, I just want to say thank you so much for the time you're giving us today to give this update. We look forward to a great discussion. It is my privilege to bring Sue Ling Zhao to introduce you, and you need no introduction. You are just an incredible all-star in this work, and you have such a beautiful presentation prepared. So I'm clearly speechless because you are amazing, and I'm looking forward to your presentation. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Heather. And thank you, Mayor Fleetwood and Council for holding some space for us today. I'm going to share my screen. I love a PowerPoint. I think Christina is smirking because she knows I love to format a PowerPoint. And that is just a little bit of an insight into who I am. Thank you all. We're excited to present to you today. It's been an awesome process, and we're excited to share what's going down and what's happening next with you all. So today, we wanted to just check in with you. In June, we hosted our 12th and final stakeholder group meeting in this development process. So over the course of those 12 months, community members created recommendations for a Whatcom Racial Equity Commission. They also developed community engagement processes to bring more of our neighbors into the process. The stakeholders also wordsmithed drafts of an establishing ordinance. And we're excited for this work session with you all. The brief we prepared for you included some background, the stewardship of the process, things that made this successful and different, critical success factors we considered in our stewardship of the process, the vision that came out of our stakeholders, more detail on the lead we took from community stakeholders, what we learned from our focus groups, some high-level input we received on the form and function of the commission. And today we're excited to share an update with you all about where we are at in the process, what the stakeholders outlined in the scope of work for the commission, our membership composition and appointment processes for establishing a racial equity commission, and finally, what the next steps are in the process. And we're also looking forward to conversations with you about what will make this launch successful. So in our previous presentation, we were able to present how the recommendations were being developed. Because we're here today to share some of the process findings, we'd like to center our update on the community-driven process that informed the scope of work and composition aspects of the commission recommendations over the next several slides, starting with a timeline. So this is a snapshot of our timeline together, and it captures major process events. And as Mayor Fleetwood mentioned, it's about 24 months. So this includes when the discussion on how to develop recommendations with the community began, various outreach events with the community. It also names major milestones like the city of Bellingham and Whatcom County contracting for a community-owned process, as well as philanthropic organizations like Group Health Foundation and Whatcom Community Foundation, who, like Chuckanut Health Foundation, decided to invest in this work alongside our government partners. We also see where the stakeholder process and the focus group processes began and the course of time, then the time it took from start to finish. On the next slide, we're going to look at the multiple tiers of meetings convened during our process. So as a project team, and with the support of the foundation, we convened 3 different meeting groups: the planning group and the working group, who advised on the process and supported the stakeholders with research and resources; the stakeholder group, which is filled with community members who developed the recommendations that we're sharing today; So over those 24 months represented in that timeline, a group of 72 individuals came together over collectively more than 100 hours of meetings to work intentionally and thoughtfully. In these meetings, people connected with each other, celebrated with each other, and learned from each other. They also disagreed and debated and found ways to come together in their shared purpose with not only solutions, but a deeper understanding of where each person was coming from. And I mean, what's particularly amazing about all of that is we did it over Zoom. And I'd love to share this image of our stakeholder composition with you once again. We shared it the last time we were together. One objective of our process was to engage with people who we haven't heard from, building a table that's broad and vast across multiple identities, professional sectors, political alignments, age, gender, race, ethnicity. This was one of the many accountability mechanisms built into the process we designed to capture the diversity across multiple spectrums within this development conversation. As stewards of their collective work on drafting recommendations, we're proud to share this table that was truly community-led and very diverse. And the next layer I'd love to highlight for you is our focus group process. So on this slide, you'll see a visual representation of our focus group process to where it's distilled into the 9 themes that are shared with you in your brief. When we say theme in the context of an inductive analysis process, that refers to a concept or theme being identified in multiple questions within a single focus group, as well as across multiple different focus groups. So when we last met, we were still conducting our focus groups, and since then we've completed all 31. Dr. John Korsmo has compiled a report as it relates to considering the founding of a Racial Equity Commission locally, which we'll be releasing in full and including in our final deliverable to you all. And for our purposes today, I'd like to highlight 4 aspects of the process. First is the questions. All the questions asked were developed with the stakeholder group. Those 9 questions asked in each focus group shaped the trajectory of the conversation in a session and therefore the qualitative information we were able to gather in the process. The second is the facilitators. We had a mix of project team members like myself and stakeholders facilitating those sessions. So some of our stakeholders who were, for example, a college student conducted our meeting with our higher ed students. A stakeholder who lived in Nooksack School District conducted several sessions with Everson, Nooksack, and Sumas communities. A stakeholder who works professionally doing outreach to our Hispanic and Latino populations was able to conduct a session with our fish and farm workers in Spanish. And our stakeholders have shared that they were really honored to be a part of that process, to get to hear the stories of their community members in their role as facilitators. And as a team, as a development team, we were honored to have them as leaders in the process. The third thing I'd love to highlight for you all is the various communities we were able to meet with. Captured on this list is every focus group we conducted. So we had several focus groups that were composed of people who opted in through our mailing list, while others shared some sort of affinity, like racial identity or being a leader in our faith communities, or from a specific professional sector, or from a certain city or community in the county. We deeply appreciate every participant for sharing their perspectives and their stories and their wisdom. And I'd love to take a pause here to create an opportunity for you all to scan through this list and just see the broad populations that are represented in this process. This breadth and depth provides confidence for us in partnership to move these recommendations of the process forward, knowing that all these voices were represented in our processes. Finally, we wanted to highlight something that emerged in the stories regarding our schools and our medical care systems outside of the themes of the qualitative report. So over the course of the sessions, we asked about our local schools and heard about a significant number of experiences from our community members. Some of those stories were incredibly challenging to hear, which to some extent we anticipated. We potentially being the case, we asked the question, we knew it was potentially coming. On this slide, there's a list of the focus group questions we asked in our process. And as I share these questions with you all, what's notable is that we did not specifically ask about medical care services. However, when we asked participants about their experience accessing local services or programs in the community, When someone had a story to share about those experiences, often people shared about their experiences getting healthcare. So I'd like to take a moment and just share 2 quotes from the sessions with you before we move into discussing the scope of work and the composition pieces. So this is from a local high school student. I get told about my race at school and stuff. I don't really care because it doesn't really hurt me. I don't care about it. I only care if it's towards my mom and stuff because they take care of me and stuff. I don't really mind it at school because I just hear it every day, and so I don't really mind it. I hear, oh, you're a racial slur or whatever. And I just don't want to complain because I don't really care what they say. And this is from a mental health care provider. I've definitely heard clients complain about being profiled in medical settings where they keep getting questions about their drug use when it's either not relevant at all or it was a really long time ago. And it's made it so some of my clients actually didn't even want to be involved with me as a counselor because they just completely lost trust in the system and were really traumatized by the experience of trying to better their health. As we reflect on those words, we feel like it underlines that the local conversation around equity shouldn't solely be in the context of law enforcement and the criminal justice system. Our whole community is interacting with our healthcare and educational systems, and we have community members who are sharing their experiences of equity issues in those sectors. The work and composition of the commission recommendations captures the need to have a larger multi-sector conversation when addressing equity. So that we'll first talk about the scope of work. When we discussed this with our stakeholder group, we framed it as, what are the tools in the commission's toolbox? What will be the way in which they accomplish their work? To be successful in its work, our stakeholders discussed 3 important connections or relationships related to the work of the commission: the community with the commission, local government with the commission, and the community with our local government using the commission as a bridge or a conduit. So for our community, our stakeholders saw the commission actively engaging and collaborating with the community to set priorities and to define what success looks like. This also creates a way to engage in the work of changing hearts and minds in these conversations. For our local government, it centers the policy aspects of equity work through the commission, serving as a recommending body to collaborate with our local government entities. And finally, as a bridge between those conversations, we can lay a foundation for the type of work that allows us to move forward in healing conversations and as neighbors. The stakeholders identified this scope of work for our commission. So this is our high-level version of it. And these key points were most important to our stakeholders. The necessity of community engagement and collaboration throughout the commission's processes, honoring both qualitative and quantitative data, and specifically naming that we need to be considering our qualitative data, being data-driven and with clear measurable objectives and progress indicators. So that way we can actually be accountable. So that requires reporting on progress on any strategic plan and having that reporting be both to the community at large and to the government. So this allows the community to hold the commission accountable as well. So at its highest level, this would be a body developing and recommending strategic implementable action plans and policy considerations rooted in data and the community's needs for advancing equity together, and whose work starts with community engagement and requires reporting and accountability to both partners in government and the community at large. Some considerations that we had for composition. So let's just carry the high level function into the actual form of the commission. The composition of the commission was the area that had the most discussion in all of our stakeholder meetings. It was the longest conversation, and we ended up looking at some factors for consideration. So when we're talking about racial equity and in the context of what was shared in our focus groups, and in the work of social determinants of health in general, cross-sector work requires a multi-sector balance in the composition. We also knew that the commission needed involvement across multiple demographics to represent Whatcom County, so varying age group, geographical regions, et cetera, and that committees would eventually be formed to advance the work out of here. So we knew that we would have expanded opportunities for engagement of non-commission members, as well as the need for people to be able to chair committees and lead in the work. So this commission has a balance of both lived experience in racial equity issues with the expertise of various sector leaders and people who can navigate the system so the strategies moving forward are actually actionable and actually able to be implemented within the systems that they're addressing. And so we looked at 3 different types of membership roles with separate processes for appointment based on how to best seat that member. So we have our liaison members, who are individuals who are currently holding elected office, like our council members and our chief executive officers. Our representative members, who are people that represent an entity or organization that could be seated on the commission, and then appointed community members. Over the next slides, we'll expand these delineations, and we're starting with the liaison members. So liaison members would include representation from county government and city of Bellingham as the entities establishing the commission, as well as representatives from cities outside of Bellingham. Liaison members will provide an important context for recommendations and create that essential bridge between the work of the commission and the work that's currently moving forward in our local government. As representatives from various entities, our representative members would be indispensable in informing recommendations, especially as it relates to how actionable something can be from their organizational lens. And for our stakeholders, being able to have individuals at the table that can provide expertise in navigating how to develop and implement strategies was incredibly important. This membership category is part of a bigger picture of leaning into what is actually actionable. And this group of members also represents some vital partnerships in how we can move work forward. To foster that partnership, these organizations and entities have a seat at the table, and that'll help us actually create something we can do rather than postulate, to sit down and have a conversation about. It's not an academic exercise, it's an actionable exercise. Appointed members are a way for individual community members to step into the work. This is also where we see opportunities for people who are part of a larger organizations or larger categories of organizations to get involved, like our philanthropic leaders, our faith communities, our activists and community organizers, subject matter experts in areas of interest of the commission. So say if environmental justice was an area of interest for the commission, we would be able to post that as a potential subject matter expert that we'd want involved, and our various environmental entities or experts in our community would be able to step forward themselves. And finally, this is the final table. It would look something like this, with all these folks coming together to work together to advance the work of the commission, with each individual person bringing to the table not only their perspectives as it relates to the role that they're seated with, but also their lived experiences and their wisdom as a member and neighbor in Whatcom County. Next, we'll shift briefly to talk about the appointment processes. So there are 3 corresponding tracks for appointment that our stakeholders identified. Our liaison members and representative members will be seated through processes within their entities and organizations. So this would be like a council reorganization would be where our council members would be appointed. An appointed member would follow the standard appointment process that we generally have for boards, task forces, and commissions, with one variation that our stakeholders are recommending, and that is a committee process prior to the recommendation from the county executive or the mayor of Bellingham to councils for appointment. So here's what that looks like. And this model may look similar. It's a similar model to the Commission for Sexual and Domestic Violence. Our stakeholders recommended convening their steering committee of the commission with representatives from both City of Bellingham and the county government as an appointment committee. Where our recommendations vary from the Commission on Sexual and Domestic Violence is that we're asking that preparatory group in the appointment committee to compile written summaries for candidates being recommended for appointment. And these written summaries can be passed forward to councils with the recommendations from the county executive and the mayor of Bellingham. What this does is provide additional information for council members as they consider their votes. Especially if multiple applicants are being recommended for the same role on the commission, this could support council members as they make the decision that feels that it most accurately represents the will of their constituents. So next steps. We've discussed the high-level recommendations from our stakeholders, and we'll shift into what the next phase of the process looks like with you all. As a development team, our process right now is to gather feedback from council members from both the city and the county, as well as our partners in the planning and working groups. With that feedback and questions and any concerns in hand, we're actually convening a small group of our stakeholders who've agreed to stay on this process to work on incorporating feedback into a final draft ordinance. From there, an ordinance will be provided for introduction to councils, as well as an interlocal agreement. Because both Whatcom County and City of Bellingham are considering establishing and supporting this entity, an interlocal agreement would be the best way to formalize that interaction between two government bodies. I just want to say thank you so much again for your time today. Before we move into questions and feedback and invitations, I just wanted to share that all the images from this presentation today were part of our Photo Voice process. Photo Voice is a non-digital way of being able to experience someone else's story. During our process, we were able to connect with members of our community, and specifically community members from our East County, both before and during the flooding, as well as young adults who are experiencing houselessness, who are willing to show us what they saw every day in their lives through the use of disposable cameras. And you'll have these slide decks and be able to see those images a little bit more. So today, we'd love to know if you have any questions about the presentation or feedback. And we also would love to know, what do you think would prevent this from being successful? Or what have you heard today that makes you believe that this will be successful or gives you confidence in the process? We'd also love to extend an invitation to discuss in detail everything we've shared. It's a lot to ask someone to get into the weeds of appointment processes and committees and legislative documents in just a quarter of an hour. So we'd love to just meet with all of you one-on-one if you're willing to do that as well, and we can be in touch. And with that, thank you all so much.
Thank you very much, Su-Ling and Heather, and want to acknowledge as well Christina Michelle Martins and the work that you've invested in this whole process. You made reference to the slide deck, and I just wanted to confirm that slide deck wasn't in our packet, but just to request that that be shared with the council if that's permissible on your end, because there was a lot of information in there, as you said, to digest. I want to open it up to council members if there are questions in response to, or responses to the questions posed by Su-Ling, or other questions or comments. I was going to say, one of the things, I guess, to delay in hands, I'll ask a quick question. And hopefully it's not too lengthy on your end to respond to, Ling, but I know that you presented recently at the Immigration Advisory Board meeting. I think that was incredibly valuable, just looking at sort of the intersection and overlap in those sort of Venn diagrams about how the Racial Equity Commission and the Immigration Advisory Board may be able to coexist and both do important work. And I think that's valuable because I've heard some questions just about, oh, does the creation of the Racial Equity Commission sort of then negate the necessity to have the Immigration Advisory Board at a city level? So I don't know if you're prepared to just briefly speak to that.
I'm happy to. What I was really excited to get to share with the Immigration Advisory Board when I was able to meet with them is something really incredible about that entity at the city level. It has a really interesting, unique capacity, and that is that it looks at compliance as it relates to the Keep Washington Working Act, which is a very specific scope of work that sure is using similar processes where it's evaluating data within the city to see how effective we're being at advancing that piece of maintaining the criteria in that piece of legislation specifically, but it's a unique capacity. And it requires the expertise and the focus of that group in a way that And it also broadly looks at our immigrant populations regardless of their race. So where we see the overlap in this is we see the Racial Equity Commission potentially being this, if established, would be an entity that works in both city and county across multiple sectors, which is its own unique capacity to look at the broad conversation of the social determinants of health versus that specificity of looking at that issue as it relates to immigration. Though both may utilize similar processes, there's this really awesome unique capacity about the Immigration Advisory Board that the Racial Equity Commission right now isn't codified to have, even though it could be a strategic partner in helping advance some policies at the county level, or maybe even a thinking partner, or the IAB is a partner that the REC leans on in order to inform its recommendations as it relates to immigration, because that entity will have existed for several years prior to the seating of the commission. And it has that background and that data. It's just it's an interesting resource, and it'll be interesting to see how that partnership comes together in the future.
Thank you, Celine. I'm going to turn to Councilmember Hamel.
I think Councilmember Lilliquist's hand was actually up first, but he took it down. Michael, do you want to go?
You're muted, sir.
I pulled a fast one, so you'd go first.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, thanks for the presentation. As usual, stellar work. I know it's taken a long time to get to this point in time, but I think it's worth it. I think that the considerable amount of community feedback and involvement of so many different people was really worth it. So I commend the work for the three leaders that are here in the room today. So my question is, I think the public would be curious as to understanding maybe some examples of what kinds of things that the commission will weigh in on, and whether or not there's binding or non-binding authority within recommendations or decisions. And maybe just, I don't know if you can kind of just weigh in on that a little bit.
I was going to kick it over to Heather for this one to start.
Absolutely. And I also want to thank you to especially Councilmember Hamel, because from the very beginning, you were such a champion and really helped shepherd a lot of that early process. So thank you for being involved. And a big thank you too to Councilmember Huffman, who is not here today, but has been involved throughout the process as well. So the kinds of things the commission that we envision the commission being weighing in on would be going back to that slide Sue shared with the kind of the high level overview of the scope of the commission. Some specific examples though that we've talked about is the commission could serve as that community partner to any department in government. Let's say the prosecutor's office, for example, and the Racial Equity Commission could say, we'd love to partner with you, or the prosecutor could come and ask, and let's look at the different policies and practices within your office and see if they're leading towards any disparities in racial outcomes, and then support you in addressing that and shifting policy and practices where appropriate or where needed. So being support and advisory to the government, my understanding through the legal review is that this would be an advisory body similar to the DV Commission. So the recommendations wouldn't necessarily be, binding, but we would hope that our partners would want to follow them and take the actions. And there's, the publicity part of that too, and just the community accountability, but there's not authority per se embedded in the commission. And the way it's designed as well is that it would be a partner and a resource for external community sectors. Like we talked about, this is across the entire community, all systems. And we could foresee, for example, businesses. We've heard from our business partners about we want to recruit better, and we want to really open up the talent pool for our local economy. And the commission would be in a position to be able to support that too. So a variety of specifics within that outlined scope. Sue, would you add anything? Did I get anything wrong?
I feel like the one thing I would add is that we have in the scope of work of the commission that it develops and recommends. So actionable strategies and plans that are trackable through data. So as a recommending body, just like with any of our other action plans at the city and the county level, for example, the council could say we're going to through ordinance or resolution or declaration, adopt this plan and make it actionable, or to commit to what's the findings of these plans. So that's one way that those plans could be more formalized if that's something that was the will of councils. Our advisory bodies, our boards, task forces, and commissions can't legislate, but we'd love to be able to create an entity that can be a thinking partner on budget priorities, on policy recommendations, on maybe new policies or modifications to existing policies. And so through that, being able to address equity at the policy level, especially with our folks on councils. How's that? Is that helpful? Councilmember Hale? Awesome.
Got a thumbs up. Councilmember Lillquist.
Thank you, Sue Ling and Heather, for this presentation. I'm happy to give more feedback one-on-one if you want it, but I'll give you a little bit right now. I do think this will be a success. I don't really see anything in the way, because I think a critical factor is getting buy-in. And I think the way you've gone about this, community-led and community-owned, you've created that buy-in early in the process. So my feedback is all positive. I was very interested to hear that healthcare and education were coming up as important arenas where there needs to be attention. That's important to know, because a lot of the initial energy had to do with kind of the law and justice area. Pivoting to the law and justice area, I'm still looking for and hoping to have community feedback on the idea of civilian oversight for policing. Some kind of audit or monitoring function, I think, is appropriate. But we haven't taken steps yet on what the best format would be. And so I think this group or part of this process would be an important place to get that feedback and guidance, I think. Do you think that's on target?
I think that's on target, Councilmember Lillquist. I think utilizing an entity like this to be a thinking partner as a conduit for community conversations, so that way that if there is a policy like civilian oversight that is being explored at our city or county level, that they'll have a thinking partner to work with. Since we are building a board, task force, or commission, I believe that eventually that entity, those people who will be seated there, will be working on establishing what their priorities are moving forward. And so I do want to just kind of keep that a little bit open, because we know that those community members will be steering the work of the commission and setting the trajectory and determining what success looks like. And I don't want to commit a commission to a civilian oversight body if that's not the will of where they'll be when they begin their work. But I will say that when you're considering a thinking partner or an entity to work with on something like that, I think you're right on the money. That's the goal, right? To bridge community with policy recommendations.
Councilmember Williams and Councilmember Martins, do you have anything before I go back to Councilmember Hamel? I don't want to put either of you on the spot, but.
No,
Okay.
I was just going to say thank you for this presentation. I think this is going to be a well-developed commission, and that I'm going to be looking forward to getting your slide presentation, and then maybe sitting down with you guys to talk about it a little more. So I think this was a job well done, and and we'll see how it flies when it takes off. But I think it's going to be very, very successful. So congratulations on the work.
Thank you, Councilmember Williams.
And I'm just so close to it and love and adore Sue Ling and Heather and have been working together closely or working so closely with them for, it feels like decades, but again, only like 2 years as of the turnaround. I am just so proud of us as a group for coming together and starting this, and for the incredible support from Bellingham and Whatcom County for believing in us. So, I mean, I think it's a slam dunk.
Thank you, Councilmember Martins. Councilmember Hamel.
There's a significant potential capital investment that taxpayers will be voting on next November, and that is a new jail facility and attendant services and operations and such. I'm just wondering to what extent the commission would weigh in on that process and when that might happen. And then part two to that question is there's also the Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force that looks at legal systems and behavioral health systems and such, and has been working pretty closely with that stakeholder advisory committee for the jail facility. So, I mean, this is like really super high level kind of, once in a lifetime opportunity to get it right. And equity is, it's got to be baked into the decisions that are made. And I can't think of a more significant and well-planned group other than this commission. So I'm just looking for the interplay. How will all that work? Do you have any vision on that?
Councilmember Hamel, are you asking about how the Racial Equity Commission could potentially support or weigh in on the stakeholder advisory committee process with the jail?
Yeah, so, and I bring up the task force because the task force has about 8 years of experience and knowledge. It's a knowledge base that's unlike anything I've ever seen in this community. And I've endeavored to bring the stakeholder advisory committee over to the task force to meet with the prosecutor, to meet with the jail chief, to meet with public defenders and such, to get a sense of the current system, because that committee will be making recommendations on location, size, services for the jail facility. And I think there's no dispute the one that's downtown is crumbling, to say the least. And a humane facility is, I think, important for the people that are housed there and the people that work there. So yeah, yes, the question is, we have a clock that's ticking, and we have a deadline, and that deadline is next November, but it's really earlier in the year for the campaign to really get the word out. And I just think there's so much value in having the commission weigh in on, provide an opinion, provide a perspective. What does it look like for equity and inclusion when it comes to our local incarceration and justice system? So that's my question. What does that look like?
Well, I would borrow Sue Ling Zhao's comment about not wanting to set an agenda per se for the commission, especially before it's seated. But I will also really agree with you and underline that I agree with you. And the third thing I'll say is it'd be nice to have that invitation, I think, too, from the Incarceration Task Force, the Stakeholder Advisory Committee, the people planning that ballot measure. And I think that that's been one really key learning in a lot of this work is just the people who can open doors and provide access to those conversations and discussions so that there is appropriate representation. That is critical, and that's what you're talking about. So that's what I would say to start that conversation. And I think for our counties, I think would be the most, the largest, most significant capital investment that we would potentially make. I think it's a really important time to take the time to ask those questions. So Sue, what would you add to that?
that there's also an element of legislative sequencing that we have to consider when we are talking about this. So the Stakeholders Advisory Committee has a total of 7 meetings, so it's starting to go into the beginning of next year. Is that right? That's my understanding of it as of now. If we're looking at legislative introduction in the fall in advance of a budget season, so in advance of having that process start for you all as council members, it means that we're looking at introduction in September. And depending on how long that introduction and public hearing process is, that'll impact when the commission's established. And once it's established, then we can start doing things like seating it and getting it up to speed to where they can actually be doing the work. And I feel like there were times in this process where I turned to Councilmember Martins and I'm like, yeah, we can do this in 6 months. I was so wrong. Because there are so many steps to these processes, whether it's building relationships with communities or doing the legwork to make sure that we're creating something that's legislatively and legally sound for our county and our city. And knowing that those things have to live in parallel with, you know, the work that needs to be moved forward with urgency. It's really challenging. And my hope is that we will have a commission able to weigh in. At the same time, I am hesitant about that just because there could be a process of amendments on a piece of legislation that cause it to be reintroduced multiple times. And so it doesn't get voted on until significantly later. And then we won't be able to necessarily commit to that, right? And so with that reality of the legislative sequencing, I do want to say that I hope that they'll be able to weigh in, but I am unable right now to have clarity on that in a way that I wish that I could for you, Councilmember Himmel.
So to just piggyback on Councilmember Hamill's question, and I really appreciate and value the responses that both Heather and Sue provided. I think that's spot on. And I appreciate the need for that time, so that I think someone else was mentioning, like, we want to get this right. And so don't rush it, because the cost is so great, and what we're not just financially, but I mean, people's, lives and well-being. And for that reason, though, thinking about the legislative sequencing that you outlined so clearly, I feel like some people are looking to the Racial Equity Commission, right, to be sort of the answer, right, to whatever concerns or questions the community has. It's like, well, the Racial Equity Commission is coming, and so that's going to be our answer, our sort of right savior in this respect. And so one of the things I'd want to ask, I guess, in follow up to Councilmember Hamill's question is, maybe separate and apart from the commission itself, but aligned with those efforts and all of the work and what you've learned from this process, is there something that could be recommended to the Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force and those other stakeholder groups that are working on that, for perhaps additional, right, outreach and engagement with individuals who have lived experience that could offer some, right, valuable insight and perspective on the recommendations that are coming forward? Does that make sense? Like, is there, in the interim, is there something else that could be done or recommended?
I believe yes. I think that Sue and Christina both co-led a very intentional, community engaged process. And there are some key learnings just from that are shareable with task forces and other government bodies. So starting there, absolutely. And I would say yes.
Thanks, Heather. Councilmember Williams.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the one thing about this whole process so far is that, well, first let me bounce off of what President Stone said. We all look at, well, we all don't, but some of us look at things from, we want an answer to this specific situation, give us the answer. And what I see being proposed is more something along the lines of, we'll help you facilitate your answer to get to the right spot, as opposed to, here's the data, here's the answer, go do it. That if that's the procedure that's going to be used, which I don't think it is, then it's like, who owns the answer? And what I see this body being is more of a facilitative body. Doesn't mean that you don't come in with data that support certain issues or whatever, but it means that when you walk in the door, there's a myriad of answers that could be developed to deal with a certain situation. And my motto when I was working in the profession I was in was to figure out, I worked by this motto: you can always get your way if you got more than one way. And that means looking at all of the whole scope of the issue, and then as a group figuring out what the right answer is that's relative to our situation, not walking in with a predisposed answer and saying that's the way that we have to go. So I see the strength of this as being that once it gets up and running, it's going to be a tool for us to use to get to the right answer that is relevant to us. Us meaning the greater us, not just us 5 here on the, or 7 on the council, but the greater us, which could have a greater effect on other communities if it's done right. So that's why I think this is going to be a good move for this body to be developed so that we can move ahead. And so I don't walk in the room with a predisposed answer to anything. Well, I may, but I also understand that might not be the right answer. So anyway, once again, congratulations on the work that you all have done. And I think this is going to be a real monumental move.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Williams. I would just want to say 4 quick things. Commission stakeholders have a beautiful vision that I hope you read in the briefing.
Mm-hmm.
Sue, I think it'd be amazing if you want to share some of what you have shared recently about how we might disagree on the how, but we all actually have a lot more in common for what we're wanting to achieve together. I will say too that in the timeline that you'll get in the slide deck, we have met with the Governor's Office of Equity and talked about the scalability of this process and what this commission could be. And that's the 4th thing, is that I think that this is something, I know I'm not objective, but I do think that this is something that all of you as partners can feel really proud of. This is a very unique and incredible partnership that you have said yes to and allowed community leadership and government support to get us to here. So thank you for that. And Sue, not to put you on the spot, but you just have shared some of your learnings and observations about how we disagree sometimes on the how, but that doesn't, I'll let you say it if you want to.
Thanks, Heather. I will say, Councilmember Williams, I was sitting here listening to you and I was really excited about kind of where you're framing things, this concept of this is a space where we choose alignment. So we may disagree on certain things, we may not hold the same belief structures, and we may not necessarily be in disagreement on, say, I believe this is all hearts and minds issues, or I believe this is all a policy issue. But the end goal, even when you're in those 2 conversations, is that people of all races in Whatcom County live, thrive, and belong for who they are, as they are every day, without fear every day. And that's the vision of this commission. So whether you want to tackle the issue from a policy standpoint in addressing policies that might perpetuate systems of inequity, or you're addressing that issue as how do we change hearts and minds so those people can be doing that work within communities to end inequities and foster a community of belonging. We still have we're in agreement and in alignment about where we're going. And sometimes we might disagree on the how, right? And so if we have a preconceived notion of exactly how we're going to prescriptively move this work forward, then we're asking all these other people to, to pick up that torch with us, regardless of what their perspective is. And we may not actually get that far. So imagine if we're trying to row in a boat, and some people want to go to Equity Island over here and other people want to go to Equity Island over here. Everyone's rowing in two different directions and no one's getting anywhere. But if we sit down and we have a conversation about how, if we sit down and we have a conversation and are able to come into alignment, not necessarily agreement, but alignment of how we're going to advance the work and row towards Equity Island together, then we're actually going to be able to manifest some change. And there may be times where we're running on parallel tracks. Maybe we're running some community block parties where people are having an opportunity to get to know their neighbors on a deeper level they wouldn't have otherwise, while we're also sitting down and looking at policies that create barriers for someone participating in our government, that make it so it's intangible to have the opportunity to participate in government in a meaningful way. So we can be running multiple tracks at the same time as long as we're in alignment about where we're going. And I think that when you, Councilmember Williams, were speaking about not coming in with a preconceived notion or being able to come in and figure things out together, I think that that's right on track. It's choosing alignment, choosing to advance the work and taking responsibility for advancing the work together.
Councilmember Williams?
Yeah. Sue Ling, you're absolutely right. I've always used the term be open to persuasion when you're sitting there working through these elements. And if I get locked in on a specific solution as addressing an issue, I might totally miss another solution that might be better. And so absolutely, that's the thing. We might be working parallel paths, but if we're really truly listening to each other and trying to solve the same common problem, if the group comes to agreement on what that solution is, even though when they walked in the room, they were in totally different directions, that decision is going to be durable and it's going to last because everybody owns it. So once again, wonderful work.
Thanks for that, Councilmember Williams. I had one follow-up question just regarding logistics when you were talking about appointments, since we're looking forward to actual formation of the commission and an appointment of its members. And just for clarity regarding when you're talking about the executives and then the councils, that's for both the county council and the Bellingham City Council, and passage would be required by both bodies. Is that, I see head nods, yes.
That's the current recommendation, because we are modeling a lot of the structure after entities like the Commission on Sexual and Domestic Violence, and that is, they do bring, I believe they bring recommendations forward to both the city and the county.
Okay.
And so that's what we'd like to see moving forward.
And so along those lines, I was just wondering, one of my, I don't want to say lingering hopes, but it's there. I agree with what other council members have said. I think the success of the commission is fortuitous with timing and the buy-in and alignment. I mean, I feel extremely positive about what's coming for our community collectively. But along those same lines, I guess one of my questions is how or in what way the small cities are a part of that that appointment process or those voices are heard. That's an ongoing, I don't want to say concern, but just a reality of how looking at Bellingham, the city of Bellingham and Whatcom County as a municipal entity, how we do that work to keep the small cities engaged in this process.
I think that's a really great question. And one thing that I want to say now is it's always been envisioned that that interlocal would have signature spots for all of the small cities to sign on as well. And for those liaison positions, we envision that small cities, partnerships, and representatives would be a part of that. And that's ongoing work. So point well taken. And we also know that there's a vast amount of great work ahead of us, in front of us, one way or another. And so that invitation's there, we're creating opportunities for that. We know it's a priority and we're going to do some good work.
Great. Yeah, I don't expect any less. I just, as things start moving forward, I always think it could be easy just to plow forward with the county and the city of Bellingham sort of hand in hand. And if we get too far down the road without that additional buy-in and alignment, yeah, so that work's important and I appreciate that that's ongoing. And I also want to just express gratitude for the invitation to sit down with council members to continue that discussion one-on-one. And certainly there's an open invitation for you all to come back as this work continues with further updates or wonderings or requests. So we look forward to this journeying together as a community. Any final remarks from any council members or Mayor Fleetwood or any of our guests today?
No, only thank you. And we continue the work. I really appreciate you being here today.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Heather Flaherty and Su-Ling Zhao, for joining us this afternoon and spending your time. I know you're in high demand and there's a lot on that to-do list. So thank you very much for coming to join us this afternoon.
Thank you all so much for having us.
So we'll see you soon. So the next item on our agenda this afternoon is Agenda Bill 23405. So this is an ordinance of the City of Bellingham, Washington, declaring an emergency and amending the Bellingham Municipal Code in order to adopt, by reference, updated sections of the revised Code of Washington regarding anti-harassment orders and no contact orders. So the Bellingham Municipal Court has exclusive original criminal jurisdiction of all violations of city ordinances duly adopted by the city. The city previously adopted by reference state laws related to anti-harassment orders and no contact orders. The Washington State Legislature recently adopted a bill that repealed sections of the revised Code of Washington the city had incorporated by reference. The legislature amended state laws related to these types of orders and recodified them under Title VII. The city must amend the municipal code to adopt the current state laws to clearly establish the jurisdiction of Bellingham Municipal Court over alleged violations of them. Because the state bill took effect on July 1st, 2022, an emergency exists involving the immediate preservation of the public peace, health, and safety, and this ordinance shall be effective immediately upon passage. And so for this item, I'm going to turn to Deputy City Attorney James Erb.
Good afternoon, Council. Thank you for giving us time today to present this emergency ordinance. I spoke with Ryan Anderson, the head of our criminal division, about this matter last week. He was unavailable today. That's why I'm filling in. But as the agenda bill and the staff memo lays out, the city has at times adopted state statutes into the Bellingham Municipal Code by reference in order to give our municipal court express jurisdiction over those criminal offenses. Very recently, the state legislature did some work, and they essentially deleted some references that we had previously adopted by reference and recodified them in a separate chapter of the revised Code of Washington. And in order to make sure that our court maintains jurisdiction over these offenses and violations of these offenses, we need to update our ordinance, which hasn't been done in decades, to be sure that we are adopting the correct state statutes by reference, so that our police officers can cite alleged offenders of these ordinances into Bellingham Municipal Court. And I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has about this particular ordinance.
Any questions from council members? Councilmember Lillquist.
I would just move approval of the attached ordinance.
Second.
So motion's been made by Councilmember Lillquist and a second by Councilmember Williams. And I just wanted to note in the absence today of Councilmembers Anderson and Huffman, we still have 5 council members present. And I believe for an emergency ordinance, it requires 5 votes to pass. Is that?
That's correct. Thank you for pointing that out.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that it was even feasible. So, okay, so we have the motion from Councilmember Lillquist and a second by Councilmember Williams. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, seeing none, that passes 5-0-2 with Councilmembers Anderson and Huffman excused. Anything further needed, Mr.
No, thank you very much.
So the next item before us this afternoon is Agenda Bill 23382. This is an overview of emergency medical services, otherwise known as EMS, the levy plan. So staff from the fire department will provide an overview of the EMS levy plan for the 2023 to 2028 EMS levy. And for this item, I'm going to turn to our fire chief, Bill Hewitt.
Hi, good afternoon, council, and thank you for having me again today. Bill Hewitt, your fire and EMS chief. And we've kind of been talking about the EMS levy here for the last couple of meetings. Just a little bit on timeline right now. We anticipate tomorrow the county council will review their ordinance and the proposed levy plan to move forward. If it passes tomorrow, they would be looking for a resolution from us for concurrency with that, to put it on the ballot. It's a requirement of the RCW that any cities over 50,000 support a countywide EMS initiative. So that's kind of the timeline right now. Is if they pass tomorrow, we'll be back in front of you next Monday on the 1st to look at possibly doing a resolution to support that EMS levy. Today, what I wanted to do was just take a few minutes and kind of walk through the EMS levy plan. And the plan is it's a document that outlines what the planning committee intends to do with the funding that comes through. And I will specify it is a plan. It's a living document. It changes when we look at the last 6-year levy. Not everything that we wrote in the last levy plan came to fruition, and some things that weren't in the last levy EMS levy plan did happen. As times change, there is flexibility there amongst the councils to prioritize different services in that. But this plan document gives you an outline of kind of what we're all thinking when we put the numbers together. So to just kind of walk you through some of the high level things that are in there is on the advanced life support or ALS side of the EMS program. It'll fund 5 medic units. It will continue to fund our 24-hour EMS captain that serves not only as a supervisor for our paramedics, but also serves as surge capacity in the system, where we can marry up that EMS captain with a basic life support rig and turn it into an ALS rig if we need to during surges. So it'll continue to fund that position. It funds our medical services officer. Most of you have met Division Chief Rickman before. It funds that position that oversees the paramedic portion of our department here. It also funds a ongoing equipment program, an equipment leasing program that pays for our heart monitors, some of our CPR devices, and various other pieces of equipment that have an ongoing life cycle and replacement costs. So it funds an ongoing lease program for that. And then it also funds our countywide patient care reporting system. So those are things on the ALS side that it'll fund. On the BLS side, or basic life support side, this time, or in the last levy, it funded equipment exchange, which some of the durable goods that we use. If you think that every call is a BLS call, because every call, BLS starts the call. They're the first responders, the first ones to get on scene. And at times when our ALS units show up, if a patient is on a gurney or a vacuum mattress or has oxygen on them, instead of trying to take that off and put the equipment on from the ALS unit, we just transfer it over to the ALS unit, and the BLS crew takes replacements away and puts them back on their rig. So that's what that replacement program is all about. We have a ongoing equipment exchange program that was in the last levy that'll continue in this levy. The patient care reporting on BLS was also in the last levy. That'll continue here in the current levy. The new addition in the current levy is a $1.5 million per year subsidy for BLS that'll get distributed out to the various EMS agencies throughout the county. So that's new in this levy. We will see some additional funding come in to our general fund to help support BLS services. On training, the EMS levy pays for a training tracking program that we use countywide. They pay for training workshops to help train emergency services evaluators, which are the people who teach and evaluate our EMTs on their ongoing training. It's also looking to build more capacity for EMT training out in the county and looking at trying to increase the opportunity for people to get EMT training. It will help to fund our ongoing paramedic training program. It's a program that we run jointly with the County Fire District 7 and Bellingham Technical College to train new paramedics. And then there's also some funding in there for peer support programs to help. And basically the funding in the EMS levy is to help train peer support individuals. Those are individuals that volunteer to help provide support for responders during critical incidents or after critical incidents, and helping with the mental health of our responders. Diversion programs, the levy will continue to fund the current 3 community paramedics and actually calls for 2 additional community paramedics. One of the big things we wanted to do in this levy was we wanted to start to tie community paramedic growth with paramedic unit growth. And while they very much do 2 different things, the idea being that if the need for paramedic units is growing, that probably means that the need for community paramedic is growing as well. Even though they're working on different kind of clients in that, but the fact is growth. And by tying those 2 things together, that sets us up for the future to be able to continue to expand that program as we grow. Prevention programs in the plan, they're looking, continuing to look at community CPR and AED programs, different awareness programs related to trauma prevention, fall prevention. It's a small portion of what the EMS levy does, but it is a section that's in there. Dispatch, in the plan, it continues to fund the Fire and EMS Dispatch Center. Also in there recommends that we look for additional innovations during the levy life cycle that help promote better responses and to look at the best use of resources as we go along. That's something that we've been working on since the beginning of the last levy, is continually improving and looking at making sure we're sending to the right resources, the right calls, to try and maximize efficiency across the board. The other item in the levy plan there is the EMS administration, which the levy provides funding for the county's EMS administration team, which includes the medical program director, training person, and their EMS administrator, and an analyst that helps to analyze the data, as well as some office support. So those are the big kind of high level views of what the plan is supporting. For us, some things that are important for our funding here in Bellingham, we are increasing the per medic unit funding up to $2.5 million per unit. This is about $173,000 per unit increase over what we're getting today. That's going to help to cover inflation and to look at the true cost of us as a city administering that program. We since the last levy's inception, we've had this continual struggle to keep ahead of the cash flow in Fund 470, the Medic One Fund, as our contract amount versus what it actually costs us to administer that program are, we've actually been spending more than what we're bringing in on the contract, and eating through some reserve money, because the contract amount's just not keeping up with the actual costs. And I want to thank Forrest and Scott Rickman and several others out in the county administration and the Fire District 7 worked really hard on looking at the true cost of everything that goes into that medic unit number to come up with that 2.5. And I think we're very fortunate to have the staff that we do that are good at putting those numbers together. And then I think they came up with a number that's going to be very sustainable for the future here. Again, for us in particular, that when we talked about that 1.5 and ongoing support for BLS, based on the formula of how that money gets split out, about $550,000 a year will come to Bellingham for that BLS support. So that will help to offset, as you recall, in our strategic plan, as we rolled out our strategic plan, two of the big things that were in there were 2 BLS cars, one of which we've funded here this year. We'll hope to get online early next year. The other one would be a second BLS car that you may see coming in a future budget cycle. But that $550,000 in funding will help to offset some of those costs. One of the other things for all of us when we talk about the funding too is there is a healthy balance in the county's EMS fund, and that's based on the EMS Oversight Board, based on recommendations from the Finance Committee, are maintaining a 70% reserve balance in there, and 70% of operating costs. And the reason for that is if at any point in the future one of these levies fail, that 70% fund balance gives us 1 year of operating cash to figure out what a plan B looks like. So if for some reason we get to the general election here this year and the levy fails, we've got a 70% cushion to work through. And the reason 70% as opposed to 100%, we also know that in that year, as we're working through, we will continue to generate other revenues that go into that fund, the sales tax revenue and the transport revenues. So that's why only the 70% is needed. But so this will continue to maintain that operating cushion. So we always have 1 year of a rollout if for some reason a levy fails. One of the other things that I know there's a lot of questions and about a 50% tax increase. Today we're collecting 19.9 cents per thousand, and this would raise the levy back to 29.5 cents per thousand. It is definitely a tax increase in that year. Your taxes will go up next year by that roughly 9.5 cents per thousand. Your taxes will go up next year. The thing that we need to keep in mind is that while it feels like a 50% tax increase from this year to next year, it's really a 50% tax increase over the 12-year lifespan of the two levies. And if we look back in this last levy, the CPI went up 25% over the last 6 years. Our wages for our personnel here, which is just one portion of the overall budget increase, went up about 22.5%. So when we look at that, and we know the growth in understanding that Whatcom County does not take their 1% increase in property taxes, the growth that goes into that fund is purely growth based on new construction. And that's why here, we've gone through 6 years, we need a reset to a new level, but that new level will stay that way for another 6 years. If we look at, and I'll share a screen here, if we look at page 45 of the EMS levy plan, one of the things that in the plan, there's a couple different spreadsheets in here that talk about the cost of the program and that, but the number that I do like to kind of point out here is down here towards the bottom of this spreadsheet where it says net after levy. And when we look at 23 starts here on the third column, or 2023 starts there in the third column, because this is another one is that, hey, why 29.5 cents next year? You're going to bring in more money than you need next year. And that is true. Absolutely true. Again, you got to look at it as a 6-year program, though. It's a 6-year plan. And if you look in years on that net after levy, in years 1, 2, and 3, we bring in a surplus. So year 1, 830,000, year 2, 517,000, year 3, 204,000. In years 4, 5, and 6, we are actually projecting deficit spending. And so by bringing it to a level and understanding that that level is pretty much going to maintain for, with the exception of some new construction dollars, that level's got to maintain us for the entirety of the 6 years. The finance committee really did find a balance in there that found here's an amount of money that will get us where we need to be for the entirety of the 6-year levy. And I think that's an important aspect of it, is just to look at it from that 6-year perspective. It's not about this year to next year. It's about what is it going to take to get us through the next 6 years. And again, that increase is not, even though we're going to feel it 1 year to the next, the increase really is an increase for the 12 years of the two levies. So Sorry, I gotta flip my screen back around here. Just looking, on that increase, a median home, 685,000 they'll see their taxes go up about $202 a year. So I'm sorry, not go up. That was incorrect. Their tax rate would be $202 a year. They're currently paying $136 per year. So you're seeing their increase $66 a year or $5.50 a month. So that's on a median home value of 685. So that's the impact. We understand that impact, that any impact right now, we're seeing a lot of different things out there in the economy. Inflation's up, rates are going up. Understand that any impact is an impact, but kind of put it in perspective. That's the dollars and cents on a median house price here in Bellingham is an increase of about $66 a year. That's the high points of the levy plan. And again, today was just an opportunity to walk everybody through those, answer any questions that you have. No action today. If county council approves their final ordinance tomorrow, then next Monday we'll be back to talk about our resolution.
Thank you, Chief Hewitt. Just as a logistical matter, just for some clarity, is it required that the county council pass a resolution? I know that both bodies have to pass a resolution for it to go forward on the ballot. Do you know if there are requirements with respect to the order?
To get on the ballot, they have to pass an ordinance to put it on the ballot. We have to provide a resolution in support of it going on the ballot. So we need for them to pass an ordinance for us to know what we're supporting.
Right.
And so that's the logistic timeline there.
Perfect. Okay, that makes more sense. I appreciate it. Councilmember Hamel.
Yeah, Chief, thanks for the presentation. I'm not sure if this is a question for you or if it's a question for Mr. Longman from Finance, but I'm trying to get to your point about the out years. I get the increase. I totally understand. It makes complete sense to me. What I'm having a harder time with is trying to understand the deficit spending that you're describing for the 3 out years, the last 3 years of the levy. Where do the funds come from for that deficit spending, and then how are those dollars repaid, I guess, for lack of a better term, if they are?
So the dollars that you see in the first 3 years, where it says here's the extra money that we're going to have in those first 3 years, those get left in the fund to keep the fund balance, and they will fund those out years is basically part of it. The other thing too, and Forrest, feel free to jump in here, but the other part too is all of these things are projections. And I'll let Forrest talk about the exact science that goes into financial projections.
Yeah, I was just going to highlight that. It's 3 years away. That tends to be a bit of a dart throw. So I think everybody on the committee there was comfortable with having some deficit in the out years, understanding that we got that presentation from the executive director of the PUD, who talked a lot about projections. He's like, the only thing we know is that they're wrong. It's just a matter of which direction, so, and by how much. So there was just some acceptance that it was probably not exactly right once we got that far out, and some amount of deficit was acceptable.
Any follow-up on that, Councilmember Hamel?
No, I just from the quick, yes, follow up. The numbers didn't look like they had parity, but I guess, if it's that far out and you're trying to do projections, I get it. I just, I'm just concerned that I have concerns about the level of funds in terms of it may not be adequate. The programs that are supported through this, I absolutely agree with. And I think the track of increasing community paramedicine along with paramedicine in general is a great strategic direction. So I'm very supportive of that. And I look forward to passing a resolution in support of what the county is going to come up with.
Councilmember Lillquist, I'd seen your hand, but I don't know if this was another trick of hand
Oh,
up.
no, it wasn't a trick. I was going to ask or inquire into something similar to what Mr. Hamill is inquiring and the chief is talking about. I think it's really important the public understand the mechanics of how this levy works. And if you think the levy works weird, don't blame us, blame the law we're working under. That we get to propose a levy rate, but that levy rate is translated into a dollar amount. And then the year-to-year increases are what's called a budget-based indexing. So it isn't that the levy keeps pace with costs. It will not rise with costs. And so, as I think the chief tried to explain very clearly, to pay for everything over the 6-year period, you have to pick a rate which you know will be more than you need in the first 2 years, about right in the middle, and less than you need in the last 2 years. If that seems screwy to you, fine, seems screwy to me also, but if I understand things correctly, Mr. Longman, Chief Hewitt, if I understand things correctly, that's just the way it is. Have I got it right?
Yeah, I mean, when you're dealing with, anytime you're dealing with where costs are going up faster than 1%, because 1% is the maximum that a council can increase by 1% plus new construction. Yeah, you need to look at it on that 6-year perspective, not on a year-to-year perspective.
So I guess to follow up on that a bit further, I had the same question as Councilmember Hamel when you're looking at the numbers and understanding that there's going to be some going into reserves in the first 3 years and then, right, balancing that out on the tail end of those final 3 years for the total of 6 years. But there has to be a target, right, I mean, we don't know what the annual amount will end up being over the course of those 6 years, but what's that base number, that target annual spending that's required to support the programs that Chief Hewitt outlined and Councilmember Hamel mentioned, right? We're supportive of community paramedics, right? The programs that are going to be supplemented by and supported by this levy. And so what is that approximate annual number? Because my understanding was that, okay, we're going to have more than we need right in the beginning, and the extra is going to go into a fund to hold for in those future years when we don't have enough. And so how do we know how much we're able to spend each year out of that levy? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think on that levy plan, if you look at the line, again, it's page 45 of the plan, the line that says total ALS expense, that gives you a picture of kind of what the floor is, what the minimum is that we need to run the five paramedic units, the support and the current community paramedic program and the paramedic training program. That's the number that gives you kind of that floor. And so as we go through and I look back at the last 6-year levy, during the last 6 years, some things changed from the first day of the levy to now. GMT was not a thing that we were anticipating, or the ground emergency medical transport, the supplemental transport revenue that we've been getting the last several years. That wasn't a thing in the beginning. And so the last EMS levy, we were able to expand programs based on, we knew where our floor was, we knew what the minimum was that we needed to do. But then when we saw those increases in GMT money, and again, we did receive increases in new construction. I think the new construction dollars over the life of the last 6-year levy was about 9% over the 6 years. So we were able to use those funds to dive in and expand the programs. That expanded some BLS equipment. It expanded some BLS subsidy here this year. It expanded the community paramedic program beyond the one that it was at the beginning of the levy to the 3 that it is now. It funded paramedic training program that in the first levy was talked about, but no funding was identified. We were able to do that. I think as we look out over the next 6 years, that's going to be kind of the same thing. Is we're going to look and we know what that floor is. And we know that the revenue projections are very conservative. And if we come in with higher than projected revenues, then we'll be able to have better conversations about, again, expansion of community paramedicine, expansion of funding to help support basic life support services throughout the county, and expanding for programs that we don't even know about right now that we'll dream up in a year. And that's, just the way things work. But we are very comfortable that the 29.5 cents will maintain that floor level for the life of the 6-year levy. And Forrest, did you have?
Yeah, just to add a couple, when we're looking at what that ending balance is going to be, or ensuring that we have enough money over the life of the levy, there's other dynamics at play outside of that property tax, right? The sales tax does make up a fairly good portion of this. That's a lot more variable. That's been projected at a flat amount that I would say is pretty conservative, but who knows? So that leaves some room for changes one way or the other. Interest revenue is not insignificant, especially looking at a decent fund balance and a higher rate environment. And then we don't know what type of growth on the other side, on our cost side, we're going to see in terms of labor, which is the biggest expense we have, obviously. So those are some of the unknowns that we're trying to balance.
And Chief Hewitt, so that floor level, when you talk about the floor level, is there a figure tied to that floor level?
That's that 21 million, the total ALS expense there. Okay. Is kind of that floor level number when we're looking at that.
Thanks. Councilmember Hamel?
Yeah, question, Chief. This is probably my lack of understanding here. On page 42 of the packet, it talks about levy-supported ALS programs and medic unit 75 that's going to be implemented late 2022. And it says that BFD will staff and operate that unit. And then on the next page, it says that with the addition of medic 75 in Linden in 2022, it's expected that the average system response times will decrease, and then that addresses that no medic units available status. So is Bellingham staffing a unit in Linden? Is that what I'm reading properly?
That's correct. So right now, Bellingham, we staff 2 units here in the city limits, and one at Station 3, one at Station 6. And then we currently staff 1 out in the county that's located on Smith Road, just off of Hannigan, at what we call Station 10, which is a medic-only facility. When we go to, and then District 7 is staffing a medic unit up in the Ferndale area. When we go to a 5-unit deployment model, one of the units will get deployed, and one that we operate gets deployed up into the city of Linden and will be housed at Station 75, which is in downtown Linden. The medic unit that's currently at, and you can look at it one of two ways, is either the new medic unit's going to Linden and the medic unit at Smith and Hannigan is coming back to town, or vice versa. It's just redeployment, but we will end up with 3 units here in the Bellingham urban growth area, where we currently have 2. We're currently operating 2 with 1 out in the county. Under the 5 medic unit configuration, we'll have 3 of them here in the Bellingham urban growth area and 1 out, and continue to operate 1 out in the county.
Can I follow up, President Stone?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I think I understand it from the funding side, because the EMS is a countywide levy. I get that part of it. I guess I'm just curious from the staffing side. I'm trying to understand how that works, and I'm trying to understand it with the points you're just making about urban growth areas, annexation phasing plan, Alderwood area, just the things that we're going to be experiencing over the next 10, 15 years, or even just during the life of the levy, when it comes to how the city grows, and do we have adequate first responders to the needs. And I'm not on the EOB, and I'm sure this stuff gets dug into and analyzed to death, but I guess I just want to understand it just a little bit better, and apologize for not really having a complete handle on it.
No, it's a great question, and partially you have to separate in your mind our first response and fire services here in the city and Fire District 8. So in our home territory, we provide first response and fire services. The ALS system, we've got to kind of separate it in that mind and realize that that operates on this county-wide level, regardless of who's the first responder. And so when we talk about our city's growth and resources for that growth and stuff, we talk about those fire resources or those BLS resources, that first response. On the ALS, we're always talking on a county-wide level. The reason though we are, as we say that on a county-wide level, the reason why 1 medic unit's going farther out towards Linden and 1 medic unit's going to come back in towards the urban growth area is that currently our 2 units that serve the urban growth area are at an extremely high call volume. And so with this levy, we are going to increase that capacity in the urban area to reduce those ALS response times. Does that kind of answer the question for you?
Yeah, I think yes, it does. To look at the ALS system as a countywide makes sense, I guess. And I know that you have to kind of make those, you reach those decision points when it comes to how do we strategically address the need, or the needs rather. So yeah, it makes sense. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and actually in the new configuration, if you really look at it, again, from that countywide perspective, basically all 5 of the units are going to urban areas. 3 of them here in the Bellingham urban area, 1 that's going to be covering Ferndale and the Birch Bay, Blaine kind of UGA areas. And then the other one's going to be homed in Linden, covering Linden, Everson, Nooksack, Sumas area. And then all of those will help support the various rural areas in between. And that's how we bring down the overall response time. If the majority of the calls are all centered in these different urban areas, it makes sense that we put those units where the calls are.
Thank you, Chief Hewitt. Other questions from council members? Okay. Seeing none, we don't have a meeting between now and, we don't have a break between today and our next meeting, which will be next Monday, August 1st. And so that'll be a tight turnaround, but I understand you'll be watching what happens for the county council tomorrow evening. And then we will take action to add things to the packet as needed on Wednesday of this week for consideration next week on Monday. Right, that's our timeline. Okay,
That's correct.
tight timeline, but we're gonna do our best and watch, yeah, for direction from you and your team this coming week. So, okay, if there are no further questions, thank you very much, Chief Hewitt, for the presentation.
All right. Thank you, council.
Thank you. So next, Mayor Fleetwood, did you have anything on this item?
Just standing by for old new business.
Okay, perfect. We're almost there. So the next agenda item is 23391. This is approval of the city council meeting minutes. So this is for consideration of our July 11th, 2022 committee meeting minutes, which are included in the packet. So this time we'll consider the committee meeting minutes.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilmember Hamel and a second by Councilmember Lillquist. Any discussion or corrections? Okay. Seeing none, all in favor will say aye.
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 Any opposed or abstentions? Okay. Seeing none, that passes 5-0-2 with council members Anderson and Huffman excused. Okay. And now we move forward with old and new business. Mayor Fleetwood.
Okay, thank you. We all know that we've been having staffing challenges citywide, but also within our police department. And I just wanted to give Chief Mertzig an opportunity to make an announcement relating to qualifications for recruitment in her department. So with that, I'll hand it over to you, Chief Mertzig.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me today. I just wanted to briefly mention that on August 1st, we're going to be, it's a pause for a year on a pilot program to eliminate our college requirement to apply for the Bellingham Police Department. That's saying that we're not going to lower our standards in any way. You still have to do a very thorough background investigation. I know it's thorough because I just did it. A polygraph examination and a psychological exam. So again, our standards remain as high as they've been, but we are going to eliminate that in an effort to get more people through the door and not make college a limitation.
Thank you, Chief Mercer. So could you just speak, sorry, briefly, you said a college requirement. So previously it was required to have, was that a bachelor's degree?
The previous requirement was just an associate's degree or 90 credit hours.
Okay. And at this time, is there any other educational requirement that remains?
High school diploma, and then, yeah.
Perfect. Okay. And so this will be a pilot, you said, for 1 year?
Yes, we're going to try it for a year.
Okay. Great. Any questions from council members to follow up? Councilmember Williams?
Yeah, once we hire someone, are there any incentives once they're on staff to get those 90 credits?
We do have a pay scale that gives you, I believe it's with a degree, will give you, there's a percentage wage increase. But currently, and that's another thing we're going to be looking at, is what can someone do if they don't have a college degree? What's the incentive to get it while you're here working? So we're going to look at that as well.
I see. Okay.
Councilmember Lillquist, is that tied to this item?
Yeah, it is. I really appreciate Chief Mertzig, what you just said, and Skip's question. I've kind of bragged about the fact that we have a highly trained police force. Many of them far more of them have college degrees or beyond than is found in many departments. I think it speaks to the high caliber of officers we have. Now, going to a four-year college isn't always the best education, right? We can walk away from that simplistic idea. But I do appreciate the fact that we can support people in their professional advancement. And that doesn't always just mean more police training. It can mean another educational institution. It can be a degree in sociology, for example, that might really make them a better police officer. So I have no idea what our personnel policies are on supporting professional development like that, but I hope they're good.
Thank you, Councilmember Lillquist. Any other questions for Chief Mertzig? I don't know if Mayor Fleetwood, if you already had plans for this item be brought forward during old and new this evening, but if not, I think it would be great to address it during the evening session as well, just for awareness within the public. I mean, I assume there are other ways in which this change is being advertised, but sometimes our attendance is higher in the evening. So just to put that request out there.
Yeah, we shall do so. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chief Mertzig, for being here. Other items for old and new, Councilmember Hamel?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Chief Mertzig for allowing some council members to attend a training on Friday. I'll just speak for myself. I know there were others there. This was an active shooter training at a school. You know, the tragic events that have happened recently are a sad reminder about the need for, speaking of training, to have police respond. And you know, it might be one or two officers responding, and they're trained to run towards the gunfire. I can think of no other profession where that is the case. And the training was very well done. So I just wanted to thank the chief and the field training officers that provide information and context for what was happening during that training on Friday. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Hamel. Any other items for old and new business? Okay. Seeing none, we do not have any executive session items this afternoon. So with that, there will be no further business before the council this afternoon, but we will reconvene this evening at 7:00 p.m. with our regular meeting. So until then, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.